Hi everyone, welcome to week number 4. And last week you took the first field notes. And if you are like most ethnographers, the first time out, you finish with a knot in your stomach, wondering whether you did it right. And I want to start by telling you something that readings this week will tell you in their own way. That knot doesn't go away. No for you, no for me, no for the most experienced ethnographer in the field. Because the uncertainty isn't a sign you are a beginner, it's the condition of the work itself. So this week, instead of trying to make the uncertainty disappear, we are going to learn to work inside it. And the key points slideshow walks you through the practical machinery, planning your observation, the question set from Mills and Morton, conceptual memos, Keith and Stree, 3 sections. And I'm not going to repeat any of that here. So watch the slides for the how. And in this video, I want to do something the slides can do. And I want to show you what fields nodes actually look like when they are alive and imperfect. And I'm going to use my own instruments as an example. But first, one idea from the readings that I want sitting in your mind the whole time. Mills and Morton raise a question that sounds simple and isn't. Can you ever really separate data from analysis? We like to imagine fieldwork as two clean steps. First, you record what happened, then later, you analyze it or interpret it. And Mills and Morton say it doesn't work that way. The moment you decide what's worth writing down, you have already interpreted. The notebook is never neutral. What you notice, what you skip, the words you reach for, all of that is analysis happening in real time. These guys as description. So hold that thought because you are about to watch what happened to me. So that question, can you separate data from analysis, is the lens for everything I'm about to show you. So keep it active, looming in your mind. As I walk through it, I walk you through my own first notes. And ask yourself where the recording stops and the interpreting starts, and whether that line is findable. So before you look on the screen, I want to show you something very special. These are my jottings notebooks. I wrote 7 notebooks during my dissertation, and they are labeled from number 1 to number 7. So jottings are not neatly organized, but they need to be written with consistency and discipline. And as you see, this is the base in many ethnographies to really understand the patterns. So this is how I organize my jottings. So this is the description, as you see. And then I try to follow the 2-column observation. And you see here my description and my evaluations. So as you see, this happens in real time, and you are doing both things at the same time. It's not easy. The first time that I did this, it was 11 pages of observation, and it ended here. So look, that chunk of writing. So ethnography is a writing exercise. an intensive writing exercise. So now look at the screen. Look at the excerpts from my very first set of field notes from my dissertation fieldwork. So from this, I transformed those 11 pages into those 4 pages that you see on the screen. And my dissertation fieldwork happened in a high school that I call is Summer High. All named here are pseudonyms, and that is what you're seeing here is a weekly teacher meeting. The newcomer education success team was meeting, and it happened every Monday at 8 p.m. 8 a.m. And I want you to see this not as a model of good notes, but a honest record from a person that was studying ethnography for the very first time in her life. So you will see that a teacher who I named did not catch, and this person was saying something that really caught my attention, and that was real confusion. Like, I tried to capture that and I put that in my field notes because that was my process to really understand the team that I was immersing with. So now I want to watch. Now I want you to watch the DIE distinction that you will be using for your assignment: the description, interpretation, and evaluation framework. And watch how it refuses to stay in those lines. At least my first time, I was not in my separate lines. When I write what people were, where they sat, the layout of the room, that was description. It was clean enough. But then I write that Nadia seemed shaken, that the group is collegial, and those aren't descriptions. Those are interpretations. And I'm making a recording as if they were facts on the page. And by the time that I get at the bottom, written in the moment that I left the room, I openly judging. And I think that David's comments about a white adult yelling at students in English is important. I don't fully know why yet, but I already decided it matters, and that decision will shape everything I look at next week. And one more stretch from this same meeting, because it is the most honest, is the teachers being processing an incident involving students, something under investigation that hadn't been told about. So you can see in my notes that Nadia blindsided, saying she found out from her own students. And notice how I am not outside this analysis. I am affected by it. And my evaluative comments are entirely findings, they are question. What is PBIS? What does Sandra mean by deficit focus? What is David saying that I should be? That's the conceptual memo beginning to form out of the confusion and not clarity. So now I want to show you a different kind of documents, because field notes aren't the only format. This is an analytic memo written 3 months later after a parents' conference at the same school. So it was the only parents' conference that I was allowed to come, because there was some questions about the privacy of students and parents and families when I was observing that. And parents that allow me to be in their conferences were consent to me recording field notes, no recording their voices or using cameras. So notice how different it is in purpose. Field notes try to capture what happened. A memo is what I think out loud about what it might mean. It is tentative, it is generative, and you'll see I'm asking far more questions than I'm answering. And that's not a weakness of the document. That is what the genre is for. So here is the moment I want you to see. An ESL teacher, David, is interpreting between a biology teacher speaking in English and a Spanish-speaking mother. And watch what he does. He doesn't translate word by word. When the teacher gives an assessment, he renders it into Spanish. When the mother voices a worry about her son, baby softens as he translates it back. So foregrounding her care rather than her fear. So he's not distorting, he's mediating, attending to what the encounter needs to do for this family. In my memo, I started calling this translanguaging as a form of care, cariño, in linguistic form. So here is what I show you this right before our discussion. David is making constant choices about what to translate literally and what to mediate. And those are representational choices, the same family of decision as how I spell my teacher's speech and how Heath spelled hers. So now I want you to turn this into the move you will make in the discussion board. So again, I want you to capture everyone's speech and how I did it in my field notes. I capture everyone's, the teachers that I observed, Sandra, David, Nadia, Elena, teachers from a deeply multilingual setting, and I render everyone of the team clean linguistically in standard English, in Polish sentences, correct spelling throughout all my transcripts. And that was my choice. I didn't mark anyone's accent, anyone's rhythm, anyone's code switching on translanguaging. I smoothed it all flat. And smoothing has a cost. I erased the linguistic texture of that room. And you'll never know from my notes how anyone actually sounded. So now, hold that next to Heath. In ways with words, he transcribes with enormous care, but not evenly. Read her Tracton and Roe Veal speakers, and you'll see heavy phonetic spelling in children, in that, in getting on. Then read her townspeople and how teachers, in her own analytic voice, standard English every time. So here are two ethnographers, two opposite choices. I flatten everyone, hit market some speakers as sounding different, and left others as the unmarked default. And here is the thing I most want you to sit with. Neither of us was neutral. There is a real, legitimate difference of purpose here. Fine-grained phonetic transcription captures linguistic detail that my narrative style throws away, and that detail is valuable for certain research questions. That's true. And it doesn't let either of us off the hook. My choice risks erasure. His choice, I think, risks othering. Encoding whose language counts as a standard and who gets spelled out as deviation. And every transcription decision is a representational politics, whether we notice it or not. And that's not a reason to stop transcribing. It is a reason to do it with your eyes open. So that tension is what this week's discussion board is built around, and you will choose one of the two clusters to post in. So cluster 1 looks across back at your week 3 board at each other's notes. Using the same DIE lens, you just watch fall apart in my nose. You will read your classmate observations and notice how partial each of us is. What did someone capture that you completely missed? Not to grade each other, to see how differently any of the two people record the same word. This is your warm-up for part 1 of the assignment. And then Cluster 2 looks outward at Heath. You'll take a few lines of her transcription, respell them in standard English yourself, and feel what gets lost. Then you'll map the pattern. Whose speech does she mark? And who does she leave unmarked? And what does that encode? So one important note before you read. He reproduces racial slurs in those chapters as a direct quotation from the people she studied. You'll need a language in the reading. In your post, please refer to it by page number or the contraction of that word. And I really don't need you to reproduce it. I just need you to analyze it. So you post in one cluster, reply within it, and reply across the other. So everyone engage with both peers and his. So last thing, your first graded assignment, the data collection assignment, is due July the 5th, and full instructions open or are open on Wednesday. I left them open since last week. So if you started doing with those, please look at the new updated one because I did some changes. You can it is worth 20% and it has 4 parts all submitted together. Part 1 reflects on note taking from week 3 of your peers and sets you for part 2. Part 2 is your own observation, either a real site connected to your research, or if summer life makes that hard, a silent short film I link. So watch once, notes takes alive, and part 3 is where you sort your own notes into that description, interpretation, evaluation chart. And yes, you will feel the lines blur exactly as you watch them blur in mine. Part 4 is a reflection of the process, not a summary. And this is the private in-word version of everything we are practicing publicly this week. So read both clusters prompts before you choose. Watch the slides for the practical steps and I'll see you into the discussion. So have a great week. Thank you so much for everything. I'll be sharing your leader discussion this week and you will have some news about that. Bye class.